The honeymoon phase doesn't end with a bang. There's no dramatic moment, no single day you can point to. It just fades quietly. The way morning light shifts so gradually you don't notice the room has changed until you look up and realize it's afternoon. And then, on some ordinary Tuesday, a question arrives that you didn't invite and didn't expect. Is this it? Not asked in despair, not even asked out loud most of the time. Just there. Quietly sitting at the table with you, the way that cooling cup of coffee sits there. If you have felt anything like this, even a flicker of it, we want you to hear something important right at the start of this video. This is not a sign something went wrong with your retirement. It is not a sign something went wrong with your faith. It is not a sign of ingratitude for the very real blessings of this season. It is phase 2. And today, we want to walk into it together. Honestly, gently, and with Scripture as our anchor. Dr. Riley Moynes calls this Phase 2, feeling the loss. And the word loss is doing important work in that title, because this phase is not primarily about boredom or having too much time, or even disappointment with retirement itself. It is about loss, real loss, the kind that deserves to be named honestly rather than rushed past. So let's name it. What is actually being lost in this phase? There's the loss of structure, the daily rhythm that, for better or worse, gave shape to your time for decades. There's the loss of identity, which we spent an entire video on in our Phase 1 series, but it resurfaces here with new weight, because now the title is not just gone on paper, it's gone in practice. People have stopped asking what you do. The world has quietly moved on. There's the loss of community, the colleagues, the daily interactions, the sense of being known in a particular context by particular people. And underneath all of that, there's something harder to name: the loss of forward motion. For most of your adult life, there was always a next promotion, a next milestone, a next stage of raising a family, a next goal. Even when exhausting, that forward motion gave a kind of momentum to your days. And in Phase 2, that momentum can feel like it has simply stopped. Not painfully, just stopped. And in the quiet that follows, grief has room to surface. And here's something important. Grief in this season doesn't always look like sadness. Sometimes it looks like restlessness, an inability to settle into anything. Sometimes it looks like irritability over small things that didn't used to bother you. Sometimes it looks like a kind of low hum of dissatisfaction that you can't quite trace back to any single cause. If any of this sounds familiar, you're not alone, and you are not doing retirement wrong. You are doing it honestly. Here's where we want to be very careful, because there's a version of faith that treats grief as something to be ashamed of, as if a believer who is truly trusting God shouldn't feel loss, shouldn't feel disoriented, shouldn't feel a little lost. Scripture says something very different. Ecclesiastes 3:4. A time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. Notice, These are not presented as opposites where one is righteous and the other is a failure. They are both presented as times, seasons, legitimate God-ordained seasons. Phase 2 is a season of mourning within the larger story of retirement, and mourning in Scripture is never treated as the absence of faith. It's treated as an expression of faith because you can only grieve what you genuinely valued. The grief you feel over the loss of your career identity, your daily community, your sense of forward motion. That grief is actually evidence of how meaningful those things were. Evidence of a life well lived, not a life going wrong. Psalm 35. Weeping may stay for the night, but rejoicing comes in the morning. This verse is often quoted as a quick comfort. But look closer at what it actually promises. It doesn't promise that the night won't come. It doesn't promise weeping is avoidable. It promises that weeping is temporary. It has a night, not a lifetime. A night. Phase 2 is the night in this metaphor. And here is the most important thing we want you to hear today. The night is not a punishment, and it's not a permanent address. It's a passage. And passages, by definition, lead somewhere. Lamentations 3:22 and 23, written remarkably in the middle of one of the most grief-filled books in all of Scriptures, says, "Because of the Lord's great love we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning." New every morning. Even in Phase 2. Especially in Phase 2. The unhurried mornings we talked about throughout our Phase 1 series don't stop being sacred just because this season feels harder. If anything, they become more important, because they are where God's compassions meet you, new, every single day, even on the days that feel like the calendar has too many empty squares. If you walked through our Phase 1 series with us, here's something we want you to see clearly. Everything we talked about in that series was not just for Phase 1. It was preparation for this moment. The morning rhythm we built, anchoring each day in prayer and Scripture before anything else, that rhythm doesn't become optional now just because the season feels harder. It becomes more essential. It's the lighthouse Phase 2 is asking you to walk toward. The identity work we did, discovering that you are fearfully and wonderfully made, God's handiwork, your life hidden with Christ. That identity doesn't waver just because Phase 2 brings disorientation. If anything, Phase 2 is the test of whether that identity actually held. And here's the encouraging truth. Even if it feels shaky right now, the foundation is still there. Feeling unsteady doesn't mean the foundation moved. It means you're noticing your own weight on it for the first time. And the stewardship framework, viewing your time as a talent entrusted to you, not a possession to be spent. That framework becomes a genuine lifeline in Phase 2. Because one of the things that can deepen this season's grief is the sense that your days no longer have purpose. But if you've been practicing stewardship, even imperfectly, you already have a different lens. The question isn't, what do I do with all this empty time? The question is, Lord, what are you doing in me, in this very season? that could only be done here? That question doesn't erase the grief, but it gives the grief a place to go. It transforms phase 2 from a dead end into a passage, hard, real, but leading somewhere. This video is meant to be an honest doorway into phase 2, naming what it is and anchoring it in Scripture before we go further. This week, we're going to go much deeper into 3 specific dimensions of this phase. On Monday, we're going to talk about a kind of grief that almost nobody gives language to. The grief of roles that quietly end. Not just your career, but roles like being the one who was needed, the one who was depended on, the one whose calendar mattered to other people. We'll look at what Scripture says about being needed by God even when you're no longer needed in the ways you used to be. On Wednesday, we're going to have an honest conversation about something that surprises a lot of couples: how phase 2 affects marriage. When 2 people who spent decades with separate daily structures suddenly share every day, it can surface tension neither person expected. We'll talk about this from our own experience and what we've found helps. And on Friday, we'll begin looking ahead toward phase 3, trial and error, and how phase 2's grief actually becomes the soil where the next season's clarity grows. Not by rushing past the grief, but by letting it do its work. If you are in phase 2 right now, whether you just realized it while watching this video, or whether you've been quietly carrying this for months, we want you to hear this clearly. You are not behind. You are not doing retirement wrong. You are not failing at faith. You are in the night that Psalm 30 talks about, and the same psalm that names the night also promises the morning. Both are true. Both are part of the story God is writing in this season of your life. We'd love to hear from you. In the comments below, has anything about this season surprised you so far? Whether you're in phase 1, phase 2, or further along, your honesty helps everyone else who reads it feel less alone. We read every single comment. If this video gave language to something you've been feeling, please give it a like and share it with someone walking through this season. Sometimes just knowing this has a name and a place in Scripture makes all the difference. Subscribe and hit the notification bell. We'll be back Monday with the first deep dive into phase 2. Until Monday, keep cultivating your garden even in this season, especially in this season. God bless.